Well, hello everybody. Again, it's Ralph Schultz. It's been a while. I have a brief prologue here before I start my special report. And it is these words. The international rule of law and democracy versus the realistic theory of international relations. Two political science concepts that are in opposition to each other today and represented by some highly respected academic individuals. And this is what's going on in Ukraine. It's a perfect example. And neither of the two shall meet. It's very hard to compromise the two unless there's a compromise. And since 1918, Woodrow Wilson, who became an idealist, tried to start the United Nations then, called the League of Nations, decided and created the idea that international relations were based basically on morality and doing good to each other. And it's a simplistic view. And that's been the view of most presidents, particularly since 1960-ish, till today, especially since the end of the Cold War in 1990, with the exception of Donald Trump, whose theory was whatever is expedient, and mixed in with some interest and affection towards Russia. Today, that is United States foreign policy, and most of Europe is based on rule of international law and democracy. Excuse me, it's the old eye here. So it's very hard to deny that. Those are very nice words, but it's not always practical. And the Russian view towards Ukraine is the realism view, the realism theory, which is, as I put it, rules are made to be broken and are bent. And in my opinion, and other people, Russia, from their standpoint, and I think it's true, does have a vested interest in the Ukraine, in the outcome of their political system, that it remains favorable, not necessarily in control by the Kremlin, but favorably disposed towards Russia, and it can also be favorably disposed towards Germany and the United Kingdom and the USA and Canada. And that is not the case today. I just saw a fantastic discussion, and you must look at this. It is comes from the Watson Institute at Brown University for International Affairs. It's May 22nd. It's Putin's Gambit, Why He Chose War and How It Will End, by a very well-known academic and former State Department employee. It's just realistic. It shows the facts and the motivations. It doesn't take an edgy point of view. But the U.S. policy in Ukraine, increasingly so over the last 10, 20 years, has created conditions that make it difficult for Russia to feel comfortable. Now, there's a realistic view that Russia, I've discussed it numerous times, you've seen it in the news, is concerned about the intrusion of Ukrainian territory as a NATO ally adjunct into their territory, and Kharkiv on the far east can't be more than 200 or less miles to Moscow. Hop, skip, and a jump. It's too close for comfort. So that's what this is about, and it's very hard to resolve the two. And their fervor. The U.S. and Western Europe has created in religion practically out of the rule of international law. And at times it doesn't always work the way you want it to. There's an embedded historical relationship between the Ukraine and Russia, which to a large extent are one and the same, particularly in the East. And one reason I believe the Russian soldiers aren't performing as well as anticipated is because they are killing, terrifying their relations, their cousins, their friends in Ukraine. They're there. It's, they can't understand it. They don't have any fervor into it. And why would they? So, a lot of things, I'm not going to get into it here, but a lot of things have been done by Zelensky and the U.S. to frighten Russia, to push them into a corner. And they've, the last several years, the Zelensky regime has really suppressed and outlawed the Russian language, Russian politicians, Russian media, Russian TV shows. It's anti-Russian. And when Putin says denazification, I hate that word, that's not what he really means. He means get rid of a government and a culture that's becoming hostile to Russia, irrational. Marauders from the West, like the German army. Here comes this big, scary, huge United States and NATO burrowing itself through the Ukraine. Okay, I'm going to say enough here because I talk carried away, and here's my special report. So, maybe we'll have peace one of these days. It's going to be an ugly, drawn-out process, I'm afraid, which could escalate. In the fall, nuclear combat, 0% probability in my mind. Now it's could be 25-30% of these tactical nuclear weapons that might be used by Russia if they're boxed in. It's better that Russia has a neutral outcome with Ukraine or a slight edge. They shouldn't be pushed and defeated. That's the worst outcome. And tactical nuclear weapons can be 10%, 20%, 3% the size of Hiroshima, and that blew away a town of 500,000 people. So tactical can be pretty large, from small on the battlefield, the size of less than a football field, to a corner of a medium-sized city. So this is nothing to take for granted. Okay, everybody, let's go. Here I come, and it's time for the special report, and I'll see you later. Bye now. Well, hello everybody. It's me again. It's Ralph Schultz. I'm here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, USA. It's May 17th, 2022. I have not been on here for a long time. The last broadcast I did was April 4th. That pretty much finished up my book, and I'm just going to talk for 7, 8, 10 minutes here about what's going on, and a few thoughts about things. So if you want to hear me recite my book, go look at volumes or videos 1 through 12. And 11 through 12 is my trip to the Soviet Union, Leningrad and Moscow, in 1968. So, Как дела? What's going on out there? Это ужасная война. This is a terrible war, or military conflict. Whatever it is, it's unfortunate, but it happened. And wars do happen, and I don't have any. I'm not cheerleading in this series here for either side. Just trying to make sense of it. So, a couple things popped into the news I thought were sort of unusual. Well, sort of. I don't know if they're funny, but they strike me. McDonald's has not only closed their 850 stores in Russia, now they've decided to sell them. They're not going to have any future interest in McDonald's stores in Russia. All 850, they're going to be sold, I think, to some sort of financial holding company in Russia. So Russians will own it. And, they won't be able to use the McDonald's signs and all that. They can use the store sites, I suppose. But they sold their business, taking a huge $1 billion loss. in the interest, they don't want McDonald's, the goodness, all American company food, to be associated with the current Russian government and regime and the invasion of Ukraine. And Russians will be better off because they can substitute healthier food or Russian snacks. I know they have lots of different good things to cook. McDonald's food really is not good for you. I try to avoid it. I do I have a craving for an occasional milkshake or an ice cream hot fudge sundae, but there's a ton of calories in those things, and sugar, which is not good for a lot of people, particularly old guys like me. So you'll be better off, Russians, without it. Trust me. One of the reasons our Americans are so fat, and I'm become one of them, because of the horrible diet we have and all the fast food we eat, which is very addictive, and it's full of salt, fats, sugar, carbohydrates, and that gives cravings. It doesn't always fill you up that well, but there's huge calories, and that's why people of low income eat that food and have such terrible health. A lot of calories for your buck. So that's McDonald's. I think they opened up here around 1956 or 7 in the Chicago area where I'm from originally. And Russians in the 1990s just couldn't resist that food. But you guys will be better off. Secondly, Finland and Sweden joining NATO. I'll tell you what I think of that. That is extremely foolish of both countries, and I'm going to denounce them. I denounce them. They're stupid. They're full of middle-aged, younger than me. I'm senior age. I'm in my 70s. These are the 40-some-year-old, handsome-looking Scandinavian types. They think that they're getting behind things. They're going to back the USA. They're just shooting themselves in the foot. First of all, Russia is no threat to Finland or Sweden. They have great relations with them, particularly Finland, although Stalin started a war against Finland in 1939. It was fought to a stalemate, which ended about where the current borders are. Actually, Finland lost a little on the edges. I think where I stayed in Russia in 1968, about 20 miles north or west, that is, from what was then Leningrad, which is a better name for this city than Petersburg, what was Finland, prior to 1939, I guess. Because, I took my jogs and runs and walks there in those sand dunes along the Gulf of Finland, I think it is, or Gulf of Corinth. Well, I discovered these pillboxes, which is a fortification on top of a hill. It's a flat thing, looks like a pillbox. It's circular and has slits in it for heavy guns and machine guns. And I walked inside of them, and there was barbed wire all over the ground, blockade. So I was probably on the Finnish or German side because the slits were facing east. Remember, Finland then teamed up with the Nazis, Germany, to fight Russia. And Russia has maintained excellent relations with Finland and intends to, with about a 800-kilometer border. It's about almost 500 miles. There's no reason to do it. All it's doing now is alienating Russia, making them more nervous, possibly inducing conflict. And they're all connected up near the Arctic Circle at the top. It's almost Norway, Sweden, and Finland and Russia are all just, they converge together way up there, the borders. Russia could occupy the northern tip of all three countries simultaneously very easily. And what they're going to get up there, there's no oil and there's plenty of reindeer. But anybody who's Finnish and Swedish or knows somebody on here, you're making a huge mistake. And some of your leaders aren't all that, don't have all that great perspectives either. To me, a 44-year-old prime minister or whatever, finance minister, Department of Defense, kind of youngish, kind of kids to me. So it's got nothing but trouble. 32 nations in NATO, Ukraine makes 33. How do you manage that? How do you make policy decisions? And what if two little countries in the south? What if Greece gets involved in a war against Albania or Serbia? Are you going to join in an Article 5 and become on a war footing with another country you have no interest in, no grudge? You may have a good trade relationship. It's absurd. I think NATO should be, let's get rid of NATO. I agree with Trump on that. Or at least I think the U.S. ought to just pull our money out, pull everything out, and let Europe on their own and see how brave you guys are. I'm not too confident that Norwegian Stoltenberg, the Secretary of the whatever he's called, President, Secretary of the of NATO, would be so bold about chastising Russia and being so negative towards them if he didn't have the U.S. weapons over his shoulder. Europeans, you've caused us enough trouble. You guys just fight with each other. 2 world wars had enough, okay? So take care of your own business. And Russia they think they have a vested interest in Ukraine. They aren't trying to take over Poland and Germany and all these other former Eastern European countries that were in the Warsaw Pact. That's just ridiculous. So whoever's listening to me, tell your friends. You can forward this to other people. I can't help myself on this one. Just going to make Russia more nervous. And we don't need more nervousness in Russia. So, take a look here at my book. Come on, somebody buy it. Or else send me an email and I'll send you a free draft. It's not an ebook. All these beautiful pictures in it. Okay, there's the book cover. It's not about war. It's about Russia, China, U.S. foreign policy, something about the U.S. economy, and a little bit of my background in Chicago and as a younger person. If you find it interesting, I'm plugging it. Okay, and now we see the email address to correspond with me. Nobody does. A few people wanted electronic books. If you want one, send me your email. It's confidential, and I'll send it back to you. Boom. And you can read at your leisure without using up any of your memory because it's in Google Cloud. And you can send it to anybody. Send it to 100 people. Get the word out. Quit complaining. Do something. Okay? I'm not making a living at this. I'm just trying to, at a later stage of my life, do something I believe in. It's worthwhile. There aren't many Americans who have done what I've done who are not famous. How many average people, I happen to have a good education and interest in this topic, have gone to the lengths to put up a TV series and write a book? And my effort is where my mouth is. And I take on people like Ambassador McFall and others. In fact, I challenge any of you big honchos to a debate. Do it anywhere you want. I do it in CNN because I think I can put a point out there that's shared by Dr. Mearsheimer, former deceased Professor Cohen, 2 former ambassadors to Russia, Matlock and George Kennan, very famous. Those were in the 90s. And let's go. I'll challenge anybody. But the big shots don't like to reduce themselves to talk to us us peanuts. I got an A average in history at one of the best universities in the United States, so I can go toe to toe with other people conceptually. All right, I don't have all the talking points because I don't have all their information, but I'm not afraid to be humiliated. Go on. Okay, so I gotta run through this here. Kaboom, kaboom, kaboom. So you ain't gonna like hearing this, some of you, but some of let's put it this way: the United States of America bears some responsibility. Okay, YouTube, don't get upset with me, but it's true for this war. based on our foreign policy. We've done it. We started in Vietnam or before that, and went on and on by trying to do good, meddling, and screwing everything up. And so, a lot of our policymakers tend to then look our policies hypocritical. We induce a lot of violence, and the country's in denial. Never want to talk about it. How many people who are on TV want to say, yeah, USA committed a form of genocide by destroying North and South Vietnam, and Agent Orange defoliated like 10 or 15% of the country and created birth defects in people. Nobody wants to hear that, but they sure want to hear about Russia. And I'm not defending Russia. I'm very disappointed in Russia that so many civilians have been killed. I'm not going to blame you. I'm just going to say I'm disappointed this has happened, and it has happened. Okay, in Ukraine now, what are we going to do now? It's a crisis. The people have to be helped. The refugees, medical facilities for the wounded, and the unfortunate destruction of infrastructure and displacement of the population and all the deaths and wounded. It's terrible, and they need help now. I mean, that money's worthwhile. I'm not so sure about the weapons, because that just makes it worse and encourages Ukraine to carry on in a war they can't really win. There's going to be some kind of compromise that's going to be pretty ugly for everybody. So they're out. Russia is, and the Ukrainians are destroying each other. It's like a civil war. So our weapons, that's USA's weapons, are making it worse because they're causing more death and destruction of the Russians, which encourages the Ukrainians more, and then the Russians resort to more violent tactics. It's a vicious downward cycle. It's probably going to wind up with some partition. There's a million scenarios, but there's going to be some sort of semi-truce, armistice. I'm not sure what you're going to call it. Russia will have taken a larger piece of the country, not as much as they wanted, but that southern Novaya Russia, New Russia, from Donetsk to Mariupol to Crimea, probably won't get to Odessa. Russia just doesn't have the staying power, the strength. Too many losses in their military. And Ukraine somehow tactically is doing really well, but they're getting worn down and by Russian artillery and missiles, and eventually they're going to have to stop. And they both are. Well, that's 3 weeks, could be 3 months, but this year, agree to some kind of territorial compromise that may be unstable. And the U.S. will agree not to put any more troops or weapons into Ukraine, and Ukraine will agree to not attack Russia nor be a member of NATO and all something like that. But they're only words. It can change overnight. Bingo. And anyway, any other country, United Kingdom, France, Poland, USA, can informally back Ukraine, just like right now Great Britain, United Kingdom is backing Sweden and Finland until they get their full NATO membership in case they're attacked by Russia. They've given them I think it's in writing, the whole thing, a security guarantee. So that can always be implemented or de facto. So, we're just, there's going to be some partial Ukraine. I don't think the Russian government is going to take over eastern Ukraine and Kiev and install their own government particularly. But you might get some kind of mixture down the road. So let's get it over with. And Russians are afraid, some Russians, becoming a weak state subordinate to the USA. And but I think that younger generation isn't carrying the legacy of centuries of invasions and this whole NATO expansion thing. I think they just want to get along. Younger, under 35, let's say, particularly under 30, get on with their lives, have a successful work-life, relationship, and aren't fearful, at least before this war, that NATO is somehow going to harm their country. I just don't think it's in their psyche. They just, they're not wedded to the past. I don't think like the older generation is. And past, I mean 1600. So it's not entirely clear that the West is going to try to disassemble Russia. Some people would like to, the hockey ones, the Hawks, the troublemakers. So unless Russia takes all of the eastern Ukraine out to Kiev, Kiev can always move to a pro-Western alliance point of view. So it's best, let's just get a truce going here. And anybody call me, disagree with me? I like disagreement. That's about all I have for today. Do svidaniya, goodbye in Russian. It's a word just about everybody knows. I'll probably come on again here and there. So take care. Thank all of you who have watched my videos. Go back and look at the older ones. Video 2 is a good one if you haven't watched any of them, or very few. The whole thing, it's a kind of an overview. It gives you a feel for what's going on. It's a little bit about me. And 11 and 12 are my trip to the Soviet Union in 1968. You ought to listen to that one. That's just interesting. It's not political. Just a few comments in the beginning there about this mess we're in here. So, okay, I'll see you all later. Take care. And remember to stay healthy. Okay. Bye-bye. Puka.